All right, we'll go ahead and just in the interest of time, go ahead and get started. Lance, we got you online here, and we have a couple other people here in person. My name is Tim Whiting. This is Turning Pages, Building Community Through Book Studies. I am one of the instructional designers at Texas Wesleyan University. I'd love to have a little bit of chat going here. My friend Jessie is monitoring the chat room, so we'll let her bounce back and forth with that. So what I'd love to hear from others here is we're going to start, like I said, this is on building community through book studies. So I just want to start off with, what's the last book you've read? So anybody, and it could be, you can tell me your guilty pleasure book, or it could be professional or something like that. What's the last book you read? Or currently reading?
Yeah, The Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Your Brain's Not Broken. It's all about ADHD, but I didn't finish.
Okay. You got distracted, didn't finish the book on ADHD. I gotcha. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Professionally, I'm reading a book called More Than Words. It'll actually come up later. And
a couple online too.
Yeah. And then on just for fun reading, I've never read a Tom Clancy book. So I decided to, unfortunately, I picked like the biggest Tom Clancy book I could find. So anyway, all right, anybody else?
Online we have Learning to Listen, Learning to Teach.
Okay.
For class, and then Lance said currently rereading The Golden Compass.
Okay.
Philip Pullman. Okay,
interesting. All right. Have you ever participated in a book study or a book club or book study, whatever you want to phrase it as? Anyone ever done that? All right. So then I guess my next question was going to be, have you ever led one? But if you haven't participated in one, all right. So I guess my next question before we move on is, what's your interest in this session? Is it like, I think you mentioned that you've kind of you've thought about a book study or started to maybe wanted to lead one?
Yeah.
Type of thing? Okay. All right. Good to know there. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started. So let's see here.
We have online that said, yes, I participated in a book club.
Okay.
And it says learning to lead better book studies at work. So
Okay.
The actual leading of it.
Awesome. All right. So today, my main, with this presentation, what we're looking at is why, first of all, why in our position, in our industry, where we're at, what we do, why do you lead a book study? Why is that a good option? And then also how to do it. All right. But my main goal is for y'all participating is I want you to leave with questions, and not questions like stuff that I didn't answer, but more stuff that I can't answer. For instance, how will it look in the position that I'm at, or how does it look in my organization, my group? How would leading a book study look, and what can I do with that? So I want you to leave today with questions that are going to help you to kind of go on to the next step. Okay. So the first thing we want to look at is why a book study. So I want to let you know that as I put together this presentation and looked into doing this, kind of a little bit of background first, though. As far as for me and myself, I've led actually several book studies before, whether it was something with my church and some groups there, but then also before I've done, my background is K-12, about almost 25 years. And then I did move a little bit into real estate. I'm telling you that for a reason. I did training and recruiting in the real estate world for a few years. And the reason I even bring that up is because someone said once, hey, let's do a book club. Hey, that's great. Let's do it. We ended up doing 4 within about a 9-month period because people liked it, And so some of my experience come from that. But a lot of this also is going to come from the book study that we, as our group, our CEDL, our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, the book study that we did this last spring. So a lot of this is coming out, our experience with this one on a higher ed level that we did this most recently. So when we looked into doing our book study, one of our main reasons at first is really to make connections. To give you a little background about our organization, about a year or so ago, we had a new director. And then about last August, we actually almost doubled the size of our group. And so one thing we want to do within our university is to find out ways to really make connections with our faculty and to really build that. And a book study is a good way to do that. Along those lines too, we wanted to make sure it's something that was in line with our mission as a CETL, our goals as a CETL, and also that as our university. And I could go into a lot more in depth there, explaining each of our missions and our goals, but we looked at that. Any type of program that we do, we want to make sure that it falls in line with what our goals are. And one of our main things too that we started looking at is to strengthen pedagogy within our faculty. So the book that I'll show you later, the book that we actually presented or that we did, and it really fell in line with that. But also that was kind of one of the pieces here, is that what could we do to really help our faculty as they're looking and striving to become better teachers. And again, kind of along the lines of making connections, we wanted a different type of format. A lot of what we were doing last fall was, as you could imagine, AI related, technology related, how you make your life easier with these different programs and what have you. And so, but a lot of it was virtual. And in conversations with some different faculty, there was some that said, hey, we'd like to have in person as well. So that was kind of part of this, is a different format that also is more discussion based, where you're going to learn from each other. So then our next question, though, the one I always want to look at is, but why would someone want to join? So why would an instructor, a professor say, yeah, I'm going to read an extra book for fun, right? Why are they going to do that? What would be their reason? Well, so these answers here, actually, I'm going to let you know that they came from the survey that we did at the end of our book study, and also conversations I had with instructors and professors that had joined us. So the first one was connections. You know, they did want something where they could connect on a different level, not only with people in their department. So we had about a chunk, about 3 that were from the education school, but they liked the idea that they could not only, those are in the same boat, but those are in different boats too, that they could connect with. We had actually a couple from the psychology department. We had biology. We had a librarian, you know, and they could learn from each other on that. So that's, the connection was a big part of that too. The content. So I think it really helped that we explained what book we would be studying. It wasn't going to be a surprise or we were going to all pick one together. It was, this is what the content is, and this is the reason why this content is going to benefit you. And so a lot of them said it was the content that they joined. The format, again, a more informal yet not informal, but still expectations type format, and where they knew there's going to be discussion and feedback given back and forth. And then I tell you the truth, most of those who responded to the survey did say that it fell in line with their professional goals. So again, this being different than, you know, book study being a little bit different than, say, a book club where you do free reading. This is more something that's going to have an obvious purpose, that's going to help especially those professors with wanting to expand on their teaching and pedagogy. All right, so I'm going to look really quick as far as logistics. And so again, I want to just stress that these logistics are related to the book study that we did last spring. These logistics fit for what we were doing, our goals at that time, and our limitations and what we needed to kind of fit that into. So the first thing is we want to do it over the semester. So for obvious reasons, you know, to kind of try to spread it over the Christmas break or something like that just didn't make sense. So we wanted to kind of have it start and end within the semester. And we knew that to ask someone to read, especially in this type of case, we wanted to be able to give a little bit of time between each session. So we want to pace something out that was going to be within 2 to 3 weeks between each session. And just kind of our timing worked out. 4 weeks was logistically our best bet. In retrospect, the book that we chose, the way it was formatted, it probably would be better to spread it out a little bit longer, just because the way the chapters were and what have you. Some people did say it did feel like a little bit long reading between each session. So that's something we definitely would look at. And then we chose to do 50-minute sessions on Fridays. Now, one thing that we did, I'm kind of fast forward, you see up on the slide there, the registration form. We did, I would call it like a pre-survey within the registration form. We didn't tell them what days we were going to do, what times, because we didn't know. And we didn't know who was going to be signing up. So we decided to let that be one of those things where, hey, you get feedback in this, and then we'll decide when to do it. And I thought we actually had pretty good response with that. It came up that Fridays was the best because at our university, Fridays are days that we don't have regular classes. There's some labs and those type of things, but most students aren't in classes. Some of the professors have meetings with their departments. So we just figured out a good time, 10 o'clock on a Friday was the time that we had the best response. I will say that all of those that registered ended up participating. So all those that had a voice, it worked out for them. So that was good.
Which book was this?
I'm sorry?
Which book was this?
So small teaching. And yeah, I'll explain a little bit with the book on that too. Yeah. So, and we did 50-minute sessions so that they could have some time if they had to get to a meeting or something like that, or, doing stuff virtual, what have you. So it was important to us to offer both in-person and virtual at the same time. I would have loved to have enough people to do one virtual and enough people to do one in-person, but the numbers weren't at that level. So we decided to do it virtually at the same time. The key behind that is having someone else that's going to monitor your chat. So you have one, really the key was to have a person in person at the in-person session. Now, it did end up that Fridays are days that we, our department works virtually. But one of us did still come in while someone else was on virtual so that they could monitor the chat, they could help with tech issues, those type of things. And the in-person person could be connected to those that are in the in-person and devoted them. So, and for each meeting we did beforehand, make sure it was important to me to give the structure, the guiding questions, those type of things prior to the actual meeting so that people kind of see what the expectations are. Like I said, we did have a registration form prior to it with a survey as far as time, days of the week, those type of things. Promoting the book. So I think probably some of the obvious ones would kind of come out. What would be ways that you would promote a book or promote any type of session? Email. So our director sends out an email every week or 2 weeks. So she pushed it through that. We have a newsletter. So we did that. Our university does Microsoft. And so we have Engage, which is like an in-house Facebook. And so we pushed it through that. And doing all those type of ways. Oh, we also had flyers. We also put flyers up around campus at particular places. And that's one question. We didn't put the survey at the end was, how did you find out about us? We probably should have. But we got about 4 or 5. We got 5 people registered through that. And we're a small campus, by the way. But that was not enough for me because, I was always taught, my mom always said, when you have a party, expect half the number of people you invite to show up. So 2.5 people wasn't going to cut it, right, for a book study. So I wanted to figure out, okay, what could we do? So like I said, I did have a little bit of life in the real estate world. I've done recruiting and what have you. So I sat down, and I've been in this position since August, but I said, okay, who are the people, the professors that I've talked to? Who has interacted with me in some way, shape, or form, whether it's they reached out to me or I did a design with them or something. So I sent out probably about 30 emails to just people that, hey, we've connected. You seem like a person that likes to grow, to better your, what you do, et cetera. So here's an opportunity. And we doubled in size within about less than 24 hours because of the personal emails. So I do think that was a big thing. People always in our industry, they always want to know, how do I get people more involved? How do I get people to come to my trainings? Well, that's one way, have a personal invite. So I thought that worked out really well. We also did offer opportunities. I'll talk more in a second, opportunities for people within the participants to also facilitate. And I'll talk about that in a second here. So you asked about the book. The first step is picking the book. All right. And the first step to picking a book is to read. Mind blown, I know. All right. And like I said, I've done several book studies in the last couple of years. And I think the first thing is to know that the person that's leading it, that's heading it, should have some sort of experience with the book that they're doing. All right. Read it, experienced, maybe used it, depending on what type of book we're talking here. And so I think that's the first step there. We did predetermine the book. Now, for our next book study, I put out to our participants, hey, what's the next one you want to do? What's the next topic, the next book, those type of things. So I'm getting some feedback there. And we did within our own group, and some instructors I've talked to kind of said, okay, what is it that you want to learn about? So we did choose a book that that I had read prior. And we also provided the book. And I think that's a big deal. I don't know that anyone would have said, oh, you're not going to buy my book, I'm not going to do a book study, right? And I personally am willing to pay $20 for, something that's going to help me out, right? But I do think that people enjoyed the fact that we were able to finagle it to be able to buy the books for them. So, and then deciding actually which book. So the main things, obviously getting feedback from others, but there's two main things that we looked at. Number one, is this a book that's going to support things that we are currently doing within our trainings? All right. So pedagogy, instructors, learning a little bit more about the whole teaching process, those type of things, it made sense. But I also wanted something that counterbalanced what we did as well. So like I said, we were doing a lot with AI and with technology and all, and this is something that kind of goes back to the basics, And it did just so happen we were also doing a series at the time as well. That was a back to the basics of teaching, as far as questioning skills, assessments, student engagement, those type of things. And so this book really kind of fit into what we currently did, but also gave something kind of new and fresh and different than what we've done in a while in the organization. So small teachings. So this book in particular is it is written by James Lang. His friends like me call him Jim. The idea of it is what I call it the Dove factor, right? Everything in life has something where we say, well, Dove, that makes sense. We just need to be reminded of that. So his idea behind small teaching is, what are the small little things that you can do to have a big impact, whether it's a little 5-minute thing at the beginning of your class, at the end of your class, some questioning, the way you ask questions, the way you interact with students, those type of things. And so, and the fact that the author still teaches in the higher ed. This is focused towards those in higher ed, and that he's also worked with departments in teaching and learning within universities, I think really does help out. So he has a real good insight to that. So that was the reason for choosing that book. The great thing about it is that it has little small strategies that literally during one of our sessions, someone could sit there and go, oh, that sounds good. Get up, walk over to their class and actually do that strategy right then and there. It's the kind of those type of simple things. So I do really feel that our participants felt like they had a real takeaway with that.
I noticed online that there's a small teaching online version.
Yeah, so here's what's funny. That's actually the first one I heard of. So I bought it. It's still sitting in my office. I haven't read it yet. Because when I bought it, I thought, you know what? And I saw that there was this original one. This is actually the second edition. And so that he actually mentioned in this one, the small teaching online, it was he had a co-author. And so I actually saw him interviewed once, that he said, while he was doing stuff for this book, people were saying, well, you're gonna have one for online. He's like, well, I don't really teach online, so I really don't have that. And then this author came up to him and said, hey, I teach online, you want to write it together? So they ended up writing, he did a lot of the research type of side, and she did a lot of the practical because she had that experience. So yeah, that is one that I have on my to-do to read. So just having glanced at it, it's very similar style. And one thing I liked about this too, as far as something that's usable, is that he breaks it up into small little chunks. And in each chunk, he has the research behind it and then the strategy. So you actually see he brought in some other books that actually I've read since then as well, supporting the research why this strategy is a good strategy. So, all right, so in setting these up, I think the first meeting is kind of one of our more important ones to kind of set the tone. So I talked about one thing I offered to other participants, that I wanted other people to be facilitators. I wanted them, I like when I do a book study to lead it, I'll lead the first session, but I like those that are reading it to actually be the ones to lead each of the other sessions. Unfortunately, and this is something that I'd love to see different the next one that we do, no one volunteered to actually do that. But what I do is I always like to do the first one because it kind of sets the tone. I already have experience with the book, so I can kind of introduce it, those type of things. So the first meeting, we did the first one just the way it worked out, virtual for everybody. We did group introductions. I explained how the session would be set up. It was very everything was very intentional with that and systematic. Also, I explained how to get the most out of the book, kind of like I just said, how you take some of these strategies and just go right away and go teach it. Explain some opportunities that we were offering. So one being the facilitating. The other one is that we actually had a couple months after, just the way the timing worked out, a couple months after the end of the book study, we have our usual summer institute. And so we did a panel discussion where a few of those, we had about 4 people that volunteered to be in it, and they discussed the book and why they liked it, and really kind of the book study and that type of aspect. So that was an additional follow-up activity that we did. In that first meeting, I also like to introduce the author. I like to always bring in something. Authors will always have something. It's a podcast they've done, or I've used one before where the guy had a TED Talk, and the idea behind that is I want them to hear the voice of the author, to hear why the author wrote this book. So I found a podcast where he actually said, kind of explain his whole idea of small teaching and how that came about, those type of things. So, and also to introduce the book. In this case, I think we did the introduction and maybe the first chapter just to kind of introduce it. Small amount of reading, but just to kind of get us into it. So one of the big things that I believe in as far as a book study is that I think, well, I'll tell you what, during the survey, I guess one of the biggest compliments I got from the survey is someone said it was informal, yet there was expectations. And that's kind of what I wanted to have out there. I wanted to have something where people felt all right participating, didn't feel pressure to it, but then also did know that, yeah, I probably should read, but I also want an environment where if someone shows up and they didn't read, they don't feel like they don't have something to offer. I've seen book studies before where actually my mom years ago used to do a Bible study where they had homework, like legitimate deep dive homework. And if they showed up and didn't have their homework completed, they could be there. They just couldn't say anything. So they were like, not allowed to participate. And I'm like, no, that doesn't happen. I still want people to, because you still have input, you still have experience, and you can get something from it as well. So I think that did help out as far as people participating, because I think if we had a different type of approach, they just wouldn't have shown up. And that's not something we want to do. So. All right, so really the other sessions, just kind of how we set up, and this is very basic, really to me, it was kind of basic teaching strategy is, start off, always some sort of good thing, just interaction as people are coming in, people are getting logged in or whatever, getting their coffee, those type of things. But then always start off with an opening question. And the opening question was actually something that they knew ahead of time that was the same for every session. And I actually had 2 different questions. And so the 2 opening questions that we had in the presentation was, the first one is, what have you tried in your teaching since the last session that you have not done before, and that was inspired by the reading? And then the second one, and they could choose which one to do. The second one is, what is one thing in the reading that you are excited about discussing today? So the reason I do 2 questions, that's one thing I've started doing in trainings when I have you 2 questions start off, is because it's the whole idea of student choice. So if I just gave you 1 question, you had to answer that 1 question, there's a little bit of like a little bead of sweat might be pouring down. You're a little bit nervous, right? Like, oh my gosh, that one. But if you got 2, you're like, oh, I don't like that one, but I like this one, And so I think it just kind of makes it a little bit more, just a little bit more relaxed. And so just be something like, hey, think about it for a minute. If it was just in person, I would do a think, pair, share, where they could bounce off ideas off each other. In this case, because it's a little bit hard to do that with breakout rooms, what have you, we would just throw it out there and let people respond, kind of like I did earlier today. So, and then we would have predetermined questions. Later on, I'll mention that I did a study guide. I found it online. I didn't make it myself, didn't reinvent the wheel, but those questions were in a study guide. Those exact same questions were the ones that guided us through each week. So, but I'll be honest with you, I don't think we ever got past question number 2 or 3 because we're going in different directions and just letting it flow that way. So very flexible in the discussion. But one thing we did do is we would bring in strategies from the book into the discussion. And when I say that, I wouldn't tell them that's what I was doing. I was like using something from there within just to kind of model what was being done there. And then we ended with the same question. So if you notice that ending question, what are you planning to try in your teaching that you have not done before? And that was inspired by the reading. So if they had any question there, and then the next couple of weeks, they throw it into their class somehow, and then by the next time we meet, that's the same question that starts it, right? So it's like a circle, right? So again, not trying to trick anybody. We're not doing a pop quiz or anything, but just something that they could think about and apply to their own teaching and what have you. So, and at the end of the session, I did do at the very end, just kind of wanted them to, as a, you could call it a launch going into your next step. So following your participation in this book study, what are your next steps to continue to grow in your teaching and your practices? And something that I've actually have thought about, it would be kind of neat to, before the fall semester starts, to maybe pull this group back in and say, hey, well, what are you going to do this year? Kind of a little bit of accountability type of thing. And the participants in this group, I really feel would actually look forward to that. So this is a little materials list I came up with. Again, this is related to the one that we did in the spring. So it could depend, it could be different for everybody's group, your university, et cetera. We do, like I say, we do Microsoft. So we had a Teams group. I set it up, and part of the purpose was to have a place where we could put all the materials or anything they needed could be in that one group. Also, so I kind of wanted the idea of having some sort of, back and forth between sessions, like, hey, I just read this. This is a good idea, something like that. I'll be honest, that didn't really go the way I wanted to, because it didn't get as much participation with that part of it. But it did allow me a place to put things such as the study guide, which, by the way, a couple of people print out the study guide and bought it. One lady, actually, she wrote her answers every week in the study guide. So she took it seriously. She'd show me she got her study guide completed, So material on the author, I would, in that little Teams group, I actually threw in a longer video of a podcast if people did want to kind of see a longer version of what he talked about. Sometimes I thought that would interest people. The actual presentation I use every week, I had it out there from the beginning so that if someone did want to facilitate, they would see that it's there, it's already done. They don't have to do something new. So any type of resources that were in the book, I made sure were also in there as well. And I did utilize Notebook LM. Has anyone ever had experience with Notebook LM? All right. So Notebook LM is Google's, it's an AI, it's one of their AI tools. What it is it's what it sounds like. It's a notebook. So you put your information in there, and then anything that you want AI to do from that pulls from the PDFs that you put into the notebook. So it's not pulling it from who knows where, right? So the reason I bring that up with this is that like with the first section, the first chapter and the introduction, some people didn't have their books yet. So one thing I did do was I was able to find a version of that PDF online, and I put in there, was able to provide some, I got some additional questions. So the AI actually pulls from those resources, and I was able to think, oh, that's a good question. It also does, what's really kind of funky and a little creepy, is that it does a podcast. You ever done the podcast? Okay, yeah. It's so creepy that within about 10 seconds, it sounds like a real podcast, but it's pulls a 20-minute, synopsis of the reading, and it's something that I did throw out there to the group. But I did it a couple days before the session, not with I haven't read, maybe I should listen to this, but I've read, but let me kind of, have a refresher type of thing. So just kind of a fun little thing to play with. Facilitator does need some summaries, questions. Some of those, depends on your book. You can find stuff online too to kind of help you out. Some books actually have those within their books too. Like I said, the registration form, and then I'll mention the survey here in a second. So, as far as some obstacles, I'm going to go and say these that are listed are not necessarily ones that we had this last time, but I think are ones that would come up. All right. So I think buy-in is a very obvious one. How do you, go over the obstacle of having buy-in from your instructors, creating those relationships so that they kind of understand what you're doing, but also them knowing what the book is and the reason for it. And that kind of helps with the buy-in. I'll say, our small little university, we had 10 people that registered and 10 people that participated as far as so everyone that registered did participate. A couple of people had conferences, whatever, but for the most part, we had pretty good. We had 100% participation. So I don't think that's not common, but I will say what I've noticed about book studies is it's more common at the book study. And I think it's because that if someone says they're going to do a book study, they know that they have a book that they said they're going to read. So there's a little bit more of a commitment than if you were having a training and just hoping that people are going to show up, right? Or people sign up and then not show up, or people don't sign up but then do show up, right? Those type of things. So you have a little bit more commitment when it is a book study. I think a time is always an obstacle as far as finding a good time for people. The book choice, people following through. Again, kind of the same thing there. And participation, of course, people get online. Sometimes they participate, sometimes they don't, even in person. But I would say I felt like everybody participated in some way, shape, or form at least one time in the conversation. Some more than others, obviously. Ordering books, sometimes, we had a situation where we had a little bit of trouble getting the order in for the last chunk of books, but we got it in time. All right. And then of course, you're going to have technical issues, right? If you do anything online, you're going to have, we know that, right? So I'm not going to go through all these questions. This is the survey. By the way, any of these type of resources we used, if at the end you want to shoot me an email, I have no problem sharing resources. These are the questions we asked. Some of these are open-ended. Some are, actually have choices, what have you. But the thing on a survey, I know people always say whenever you do surveys, they're always like, well, if anyone answers it, right? That's always a big problem when you're doing trainings, if someone's going to participate in a survey. Just the mindset when creating a survey, I think of making it simple, making it efficient, making it convenient. We only sent this out one time on email. We didn't do it at the last session, but we just sent out like a couple days later, and we got 70% participate with just being sent out one time. So it just kind of depends. The question I love here, and I'll just go and give credit where it's due. Our director is the one that actually gave me the idea of this question. I wanted a question where I could use in our panel where it was like soundbite of what people thought, but you didn't want to just say, hey, write something good about the book study, right? So the question is, if another faculty member was interested in joining a similar CETO book study, but they were on the fence, what would you tell them? And so that actually helped me to get some stuff as we do other book studies. I could say, hey, this is what faculty members are saying about our book studies. So some simple lessons learned. I know that this semantics at this level, what we're doing here, I call it a book study. In the real estate world, when I told my broker, hey, I'm thinking about doing a book study, she said, call it a book club because no one will come to a book study. And she's probably right, But here, because I don't know, there's something about, the idea of the academia, and that people know that if it's a book club, maybe I'll show up, maybe not. I'll just have coffee and maybe we'll talk about it, maybe we won't, Whereas I think a book study does have a little bit of implication. Like I said, informal yet with expectations with that. So that's just, again, semantics, but I call it a book study. I think being over prepared is always good. The personal invites, like I said, I think really do help, and that helps with anything that we do. I would have liked to have more interaction outside of the sessions, but I think we're building on that. I did think, like I said, I did reach out to the author, actually. I did ask him, hey, do you have anything that we could use for it? He said, no, but if you have something, let me know. I'd like to look at it. And actually, even afterwards, I communicate with him a little bit about it, let him know what happened with it. With social media, I did actually post that, I think on a Friday I posted my latte with the book and said, hey, it's a Friday, having coffee with our book. And I tagged the author, and then he responded. So they're going to want to communicate because, let's be honest, they want to sell more books. They're writing more books, and he just had a book that actually just dropped a couple months ago. So, they're going to communicate. I'm actually in a book study. It's one that's I guess it's international. About 95 people are signed up for it. It's one that I found out about. I actually heard about it on a podcast that the author was doing, and the author said, oh, by the way, this guy's doing a book study on it. You could join it. And so I did, and then it ended up the first session, the author joined the book study at the end and just kind of gave his piece on it. So they want to participate because they know that this is their bread and butter, right? So, and I do like I said, we did a follow-up opportunity with the panel. I think that's a good way to have something that it's just because the book ended doesn't mean that we don't still do something or have some sort of connection. So. This is this slide here. This is definitely, I'm not going to really go over this too much. Like I told you, there's another book study I'm involved in. The book is called More Than Words. It's really about how do we teach writing in a world of AI is really what it is. And so it's a really interesting book, but David Buck is the guy that's leading the book study. And what's interesting is I reached out to him. He's done about 5 or 6 of these where it literally is. I mean, he has people from Australia and Israel and all participating in this book study as well as, so, I mean, it's interesting. But I asked him, I said, hey, give me some, what are your main, things to do, things not to do. So he wrote me a much longer email. I'd share with you if you'd like it, but these are kind of the basic things that he mentioned there. So, but in the, as far as for timing, I'd like to go ahead and just throw out the Q&A portion of this. So what questions, anyone online, or what questions you all have about either what we did or what you could do with your own ideas?
I have one.
Yes.
Would you reuse the same book or always do a new book
Yes.
for future books?
Yes. I think it depends on the situation. I think a book like this one is actually a good one to maybe bring back around. We talked about doing it again in the fall. But in retrospect, as we've been thinking about it, I think I would probably bring a new one up in the fall. But then maybe partly because I want to see who else is interested in doing book studies and then do it this time around. If I'd had a ton of response like, hey, I love that, that sounds like a great book, I just can't do it in the spring, then I would consider maybe offering the fall. But I think we have some momentum with the people that were in it, so I think they would probably like a different book. So, but in some cases, maybe we'll do it more than one time. We actually were trying to get really hoping to get the author to come to our university, and he was willing to. Just the one thing that drives everything, right? The money. Just didn't work out this time, but we thought that would be good. Like if he did come, then we could promote another book study with his book because of him being there. A lot of times that would draw people too. So maybe in the future.
When you had other people leading the sessions, did you write questions for them or how did they prepare?
That's a great question. Now with this particular one, like I said, no one actually volunteered to do it. But in other ones I've done, actually every other one I've done, people just all jumped in, no problem. And so in a couple of those books, they actually had guiding questions at the end of each chapter. So, but I would have questions prepared for them just because they make it easier for you. But I always had people that, they would maybe look at the questions, but as they read, they had other questions in their head. So they would sometimes have their own, that type of stuff. But I would at least have it prepared. And I went ahead and had a PowerPoint slide for them so that it wasn't like they had to create anything, so they could if they wanted to, but they didn't have to. So I would definitely suggest at least having some sort of questions ahead of time they could use. Yeah. The questions I found for this book, what's interesting about it is it wasn't like low level type of questions. In fact, I would say it was probably the higher level of Bloom, some of the questions I found, because it wasn't just like, what do you think about this? It was, the author mentioned this, go try this in your class. And did it work or not work type of thing. And so I threw in some of those questions in there too, just because it was an action type of thing. So.
I have a second one.
Yeah.
In the sessions and conversations, would you try to circle back to the main topic you started with your questions, or would you just let the rabbit trails go? Like it's just organic conversation?
I really let it be organic conversations. I would say if there were some main points, if I'd gone through and just say, okay, I really want to make sure that I would make sure that some stuff was hit. But I would just really kind of let's see. And sometimes, we'd have a list of 10 questions up there, but it might be like, hey, you know what you just said, that kind of goes along with this next question. Let's skip down to number 7. So I would definitely, in a book study, book club, what do you want to call it? I'd say that the flexibility is key on that with that. Any other questions? Anything from our chat? Our chat of one? All right. Well, cool. Well, there's a couple emails there. That's our CETL, our main email, but then my personal email there as well. So if you do want any type of the materials or anything that we did, I know that these slides are provided, but if there's anything that you want, just shoot me an email, and I have no problem sharing. Sharing is caring. Sharing is caring. Yes. Yeah. So the first one's free, but after that, I start charging. All right. All right, cool. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.